Welcome to video 4 of 7 from the Roman Army 2021 UofW lecture on war, strategy, and so on. In this fourth video, a short video, I'm just going to introduce the military environment. So talking about why Romans go to war, talking about Ludwig's grand strategy and related things, and then responses to Ludwig and so on. And now sort of hone in on the particular environment where all this is happening, the frontiers and the bases and so on. So just introduce that first, and then the next video will provide you with overviews of lots of places, or some places. Okay, the military environment, where all this happened, the forts and cities. So here is a map I showed you before for the frontiers of the Roman Empire as they were in the middle of the 2nd century CE. Again, as I said, the triangles are more or less legionary bases. I believe red things are, you can see some red circles are cities, and then some of the squares are like cities that had the odd legionary base in it, and their veteran settlements and so on. As I've noted before in other videos and other lectures, the soldiers were more or less different in the Republican era up to from Pullo up into Augustus. After that, more or less based in the frontiers, first sort of non-permanent locations, which became more permanent, or I should say, they used more permanent materials in their fortifications. This also changed over time. So, and here they are at this point, and most of the soldiers, at least the legionaries and auxiliaries who were based in the frontiers, were based in were based in fortresses that came in a variety of sizes, from bigger forts to smaller fortlets to watchtowers, and of course there's also walls, as you find here. Hadrian's Wall, the Antonine Wall, there's the Fosatum Africae in North Africa, sort of Tunisia, and even further down into Africa, Proconsularis, and possibly also in and around Germany as well. So this gives you a good broad range of good idea of where they were, okay, in all these locations, and to give you an idea of what they looked like, some more general points. So it's these areas where the soldiers were that are the so-called frontier, okay. It kind of looks like a line on here, but most people now see it as more than a line, more of a sort of a zone, okay. That wasn't just like a modern border where, one people on one side, you go through checkpoints, although there were those, and zones of interaction where you get frontier communities, the people who live in these areas, yes, a lot of Roman soldiers in the wider military community, but interacting with the people who live around there and sort of forming these hybrid frontier communities. So, the definition of frontier is the frontier of the empire could be seen as a moral barrier. One of the older views is that the frontier of the empire could be seen as a moral barrier. Inside were the arts, discipline, humanity. Outside were wildness, irrationality, savagery, and barbarity. Certainly that's more along the lines of how many Romans saw it. So even if we say that this is a zone of all sorts of interaction and military interactions, but as part of that, the Romans might see everything on the inside, more civilized, especially in Italy, Greece, etc., and on the outside, wild, irrational, non-Roman barbarians. As far as the forts themselves, here is a plan of one of them, Innichstil, I can't pronounce that place, in Scotland, and many of them followed a pretty commonly reproduced form. Okay, this is so-called playing card shape. Obviously, the smaller they were, there was more room for variation. A tower is something else. And there were big shifts from the 3rd into the 4th century in design. They got smaller and more heavily fortified walls and so on. We'll see some of those. I should say that these physical fortresses, these physical manifestations, permanent manifestations of Roman camps, I say that because they followed pretty closely the design of the temporary camps that existed back in the Republican era, so Pullo and before that. They would march, and we have some evidence for this, Polybius and so on. It gives an idea of them putting up camps and taking them apart, and they had many of the same components that you find in these structures. So the barracks, which are all these ones, and headquarter buildings and the main street sort of crossing in the center, and various gates and other structures associated with horses and supplies and there's medical care and so on. Okay, so a wide variety of different stuff. So the frontiers are kind of the military environment, a big part of the discussion of war and strategy. This is where a lot of the wars happen and launch from, and this is where a lot of the soldiers are based to go off to war. So that ends this 4th video, which I can't seem to stop.